Shanti. The mind is a wonder. Such a powerful, creating energy. To harness that power to create that which will bring joy, peace, comfort. This is the goal, the focus. How to master this extraordinary energy. In silence, in stillness, letting go, allowing, accepting, appreciating. The mind opens itself, allowing it to be used to create beauty, guided by that inner truth that is now accessible, available. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Welcome to Interview with Raj Yogi. And the topic tonight, as we had mentioned, that these topics that we'll be taking on since the last few weeks are these really powerful slogans. We call them slogans. It's like a whole entire depth of Raj Yoga in this powerful sentence that regular students we get these powerful slogans and trying to unpack them. And actually, the slogan was, to imbibe truth, one needs the power to tolerate. And so that's a really, just that word imbibe, where many don't even know what that means. But I found that to be a very interesting topic because some may not even understand the relationship or even what is tolerance, because the way we use it in day-to-day life, I don't really think it's actually the way we use it in the study of Raj Yoga. So maybe we'll just start with what is tolerance in this study.
What is tolerance? It's a good question.
By the way, for those, if you have issues with audio on Instagram as well as on YouTube, please make sure to send us a note in the chat box. We'll be keeping our eye out.
So hopefully you can hear what's being said. So actually, tolerance is perhaps quite misunderstood in terms of an essential, maybe more than even quality, but capacity or capability. And it comes from a connection to the truth of myself, the truth of every human being, which is that spiritual entity, the soul. And when I am in connection with that sense of myself, that identity, I am able to access a richness, an inner richness, that then allows me to be able to accept and appreciate whatever might be happening, whatever someone's doing, all the things that we would think of as tolerating. But they're not that I put up with, but I am so content myself because of what I'm connected to within, that whatever's happening without is fine. So tolerance isn't so much about what someone else is doing or what's going on, but how am I? How connected am I internally? And how much am I in touch with my own inner wealth and ability to be inwardly content? In fact, we can think of tolerance as a function of personal contentment. How tolerant am I? How much contentment am I experiencing at any given moment? When we're not content, chances are we're not going to be very tolerant.
So it's interesting. It's interesting because the slogan that we were going to unpack is about you need to absorb the truth, basically. You need tolerance. So is it sort of like a cyclical sort of thing?
Yes, that's a good way of putting it. That the more I can be connected to my own truth, the more tolerant, more a sense of contentment that will create. It's an interesting thing. And of course, this truth is not some temporary or limited truth about what I may have done or what may have happened in my most recent past, but rather an eternal sense of self. This is our fundamental, if you will, foundational truth. And when I'm connected to that, then I find I am more content, more at peace inwardly, and therefore more accommodating, more able to accept what someone else may be doing or what's going on.
So it sounds like I need tolerance to absorb truth, but I need truth to be able to have tolerance. Where does one begin then?
Well, interesting. So I want to imbibe tolerance. And in a way, when we use the word imbibe, and maybe that's a good aspect to look at now, is what does it mean to imbibe?
I never heard of that word until I came into this study.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. It's not a word that we use very often in regular life, you could say, as a regular thing. But I like to think of it as putting something into practice, having the ability to use it. Am I able to express? So by expressing tolerance, which again relies on me being inwardly connected to my truth, I then begin to generate that truth. Maybe just say again the slogan.
Yeah, it's interesting. The slogan was to imbibe truth. You need tolerance.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So I'm getting a little backwards here. So to imbibe truth, I need tolerance.
It's quite interesting.
Which,
mm-hmm.
Yeah. What does it mean?
Well, I was really thinking about it because actually you were sharing earlier, because we were having this conversation, you were saying that, the fact that one is intolerant, it means that there must be ego, which is quite interesting. When there's ego, then you can't really accept anything. Like it's like as if someone can't say something to you that you would be open to understanding. And then sometimes I think about that when there's something that you think that's wrong, that's happening, ego is at work. You're like, they're wrong. It's like, doesn't matter what somebody tells you. So it feels like, when you shared that earlier, that was really thought provoking. When there is ego, then maybe I wonder about if there's a need for disinterest.
Again, I always like to start with, where am I? How am I internally? Again, plugging into that truth, I can't, if I have ego, definitely I'm not going to be tolerant. And if I have ego, I'm completely disconnected from my truth at that moment. Matter of fact, the definition of ego is the false self. So I'm not connecting to that truth of myself at that moment. I am perhaps relying on either being recognized or even just acknowledging, seeing myself in a certain way that limits very much my ability to, it puts me in a very reactive mode. So it limits my ability to be okay with whatever someone else may be doing or saying or what's going on. So I definitely, I personally, want to go into that stillness, want to check in on myself. If I'm feeling anything like an intolerance, even the energy of it, if I'm feeling any of that going on. Now, of course, that's for myself. If I'm experiencing intolerance coming towards me, well, again, how am I going to be able to perhaps help that individual? And it's not maybe about helping, because quite frankly, we really need to take care of ourselves, but at least provide an environment for perhaps something to change for that individual. Because often there's just a lack of understanding. We're incredibly limited at the moment we become reactive. So there's a lack of truth somewhere. So can I at least embody it myself? Can I at least be in a state of truth myself, so that some truth is coming into that interaction or that situation that might then change the dynamic?
Yeah, when you were mentioning about the aspect of ego, it was making me think about, what happens when you're not tolerant. And as you had mentioned, this false sense of self, and whether it's true or not, I was thinking about, the capacity to endure in the midst of falsehood. And that word endurance actually came to mind because we actually had a session on tolerance probably about a year ago in an interview with Raj Yogi. And because that word's such an interesting word, I was really thinking about the capacity to endure. And not like, this, again, girding down, but in terms of endurance when it comes to, we were using the example of running a race, but the capacity to withstand all these other forces so that you're still waiting for the real thing.
Yeah, definitely. Building capacity is sometimes an expression we use, which again suggests that you're increasing your endurance. I think there, I guess the other side of that might be reaching a breaking point.
Which is why I was thinking about the disinterest.
Yeah, definitely. And I think connected with disinterest is, there's two ways of going at that: having an incredible interest in something else, but there's also freedom. In the idea of disinterest is that I'm freeing myself or detaching myself from desires, expectations that again kind of remove or reduce my flexibility at that moment. I am now demanding that there be a particular that I need something to be happening in the situation that isn't. So, with the idea of tolerating, it's kind of expanding what I'm okay with, rather than, if it's not this, which is incredibly limited, then I'm going to have a problem. I become reactive, and there's no ability to tolerate even the idea of tolerating is an ability to bend. Now, we often think that somehow then I'm doormatting, I'm bowing down. And I love the image that we often use for tolerating, which is a tree that's laden with fruit and so is bowing down to offer that fruit. But that tree is full, it's rich, rather than lacking. So connecting again to fullness, not needing anything to be different than it is, a flexibility. You spoke about a disinterest, which means, again, there's almost a connection, not the disinterest that doesn't matter, I don't care, because sometimes we have that idea with tolerating.
The way that word is used.
It's like, well, it doesn't matter, don't care. I'm okay with it, it's fine. Not that kind of
Or like, I had to tolerate this person. They don't have to tolerate me.
Yeah.
So
definitely, I think if we look at this as a spiritual capacity that I'm building, coming from this foundation of a spiritual awareness, which again is always supporting anything that I'm trying to do, any capacity I'm trying to build. The fundamental truth is that spiritual awareness. And so, it's an interesting thing of imbibing tolerance or imbibing truth.
I wonder if it's both. Yeah, it's interesting because, for those who have taken the course and those who have actually listened to the interview with the Raj Yogis, we've gone through the different powers. We always keep mentioning it's not like go at each of these powers one by one, but I'm sure in your own experience, it's sort of like it's quite fluid in terms of your experience.
Yeah, they're very interconnected. All these capacities, these powers, if you will, spiritual powers or abilities. And sometimes we call them superpowers. And they can certainly feel that way when you're faced with something kind of an extreme moment. And, everyone around you wondering, how did you do that? Because it just seems so, and not that I'm talking about anything superhero wise in terms of we're in danger or anything like that. But say you're dealing with someone who's extremely angry or upset. And for everyone else, it's just creating an incredibly uncomfortable situation. But your response seems so extraordinary. I guess that's it. It's like it gives you these extraordinary abilities in the sense not many might feel capable of expressing such a capacity when faced with these circumstances, certain circumstances, where it can become, quite heated emotionally. And so the more free I am from the energy that's being generated, I have to be connected to something very powerful internally, just as even more powerful. And again, this is what that spiritual awareness, that truth is providing me with, that anchor.
Can you think of a situation in the past for yourself where you're basically at a moment where you have to check in with yourself? Do I respond this way or do I respond the way I used to respond? And if you can recall sort of what's going on inside, and like, did you have to use, I don't like this coping thing, so this is not where it's going at. It's like, do I have to broaden my sense of understanding that's based on eternal truth to be able to respond differently?
Actually, yeah, right away, a moment came to mind even earlier as we were chatting. A link to a situation I experienced at work in which a client did, in fact, get extremely upset with me and was not happy with the way, by the way, I'm a Pilates instructor. And so this was if you can say, a personal training session. And they were not pleased. They wanted something very specific. They were and what they wanted, in fact, was even not reasonable. But, you're sort of trying to accommodate. And then they just get very upset because it's ultimately not working out for them because, in fact, it never could because of what they were demanding. And they get very upset. And it was very interesting to observe myself, because initially there was a bit of reaction coming. And I realized at that moment, it was so clear, I have disconnected from my truth, and my truth of fundamentally that I'm this spiritual being, and that the role that is most fundamental to me as a spiritual being is to be at peace, to be able to provide an atmosphere that is beneficial for everyone. But at that moment, I was in this limited identity of personal trainer, of Pilates instructor. And that was being called into question. And so there was that reactivity. So that disconnect from truth didn't allow me to tolerate. But the moment I realized it, I was able to reconnect to my truth. And this, of course, is because of, practicing. And I'm practicing that. And the moment I connected to that truth, it was amazing, because, of course, yes, what do I say? What do I do at this moment to address what's happening to this individual? Because immediately there was a feeling of compassion. The intolerance changed immediately to compassion. And then I found that what was most useful to that individual was available to me. What to say, what to do. It sort of just came very easily, and the person responded very positively to it, in fact. So it provided an opportunity for them to come out of that space that they'd gone into as well. So very interesting experience.
Well, if anything I take from that is like, I need to practice soul consciousness all the time so that
we all do.
Yes, because you can access that capacity. Because it does make me think about it can't just be something that you just think about at that moment.
No, it was actually quite wonderful. And when I mentioned about it being something seen as extraordinary, after the person left, because, everybody in the studio kind of knew something was happening, and they were just, what happened? How did you, what did you do? And, or it must have been so difficult, and realizing actually it wasn't. The moment I connected to my truth, everything became very easy, because I didn't have anything invested anymore in this other person. So much we lose our ability to tolerate, because we invest our happiness and our peace in someone else's response to us. And it's like giving someone, my happiness and my peace, and then asking for them to give it to me. And so much is, how much am I giving away my capacities rather than developing them and nurturing them through spirituality?
So can you recall, like, at that moment, was it that you were feeling that you're a soul? Was it that you were feeling that you're eternal? Because I think many try to put themselves in that situation, and they're actually really intellectualizing it.
Right. Well, definitely, this is something you drill. It's kind of like, anyone that has to deal with an extreme situation, for example, a paramedic, at that moment, you can't start to go through your checklist of whatever. It has to be automatic. And so, the practice that I put in of not thinking of myself as a spiritual being, but actually experiencing it, which is a very quiet, simple, still, it's a very beautiful experience of the self, but the simplicity of it and the incredible freedom and lightness, that comes in that state of soul consciousness, that came, and literally what it felt like was, as soon as I felt, it was almost like you're sliding on some ice when you start to feel that reactivity. Well, the moment I even felt a hint of it, I realized, whoa. Often that's what happens. It's not that I say whoa, because that would be very strange for everyone around me. But internally, there's kind of like a no. If you're starting to slide on ice, you might go, whoa, or no. Internally, there's this no, almost stop. It's almost you can't even think. Don't even try to move even internally in your mind, because right now you're so wrong. You're about to have an accident. So just stop. And the moment I did, that's the drilling. When you sit to practice soul consciousness, you're basically pausing and connecting internally and allowing that reality of the self to reemerge, because you've disconnected. And as soon as you do, along with that reality comes all these innate capacities. But you right away just feel well, you feel safe, you feel secure, you feel capable. Whereas moments before, you felt, I'm about to have a big accident here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so sliding, I'm so, going awry here. So it's a very simple thing. And I think sometimes we can complicate, overthink it. We have maybe ideas about what does it mean. And it's such a simple state.
Perhaps maybe we don't appreciate the impact or trust the impact if we were to practice.
Yeah, because it actually can feel like the very opposite of the energy that you're facing at that moment, not just externally, but even internally with the emotions that might be coming up. They tend to convince us that something quite, almost sort of like a light show or something needs to happen, rather than it's such a quiet thing. But that silence has such depth. Imagine that you connect to something eternal, infinite. Like this energy that has no bottom, no end. And that's what you're plugging into. It's not that you are infinite, have no end, but you're plugging into a capacity that is vast. But it's so simple and so quiet that, yes, you could underestimate it.
Would you say that, because it's interesting, because from what you're sharing, when I become soul conscious, not that I'm thinking about, I'm in that experience, all these other capacities, one of them could be tolerance, but all these different capacities just naturally emerge. Yeah. So that it becomes something I'm practicing for a long period of time, but it becomes something that I can move into that awareness at any time, whenever it's needed, when I'm completely off my position of awareness.
Yeah, and I think it's actually, I've seen those moments like the one I described as really a gift, even though it can feel almost a little bit unpleasant. And, we sometimes don't help ourselves by, for example, this particular situation. I knew I was going to be seeing this client. We all knew we would, because what they wanted was so many hours of sessions that it meant that they were going through all the instructors in the studio. And, we knew ahead of time, this is a difficult, challenging individual, etc. But, so, I was maybe already gearing myself up to be affected, rather than imagine at that moment, you're already setting the stage to be connected to your truth, rather than waiting for it to become a crisis, if you will.
Right.
Sometimes we also kind of make things a little more difficult, challenging. But it was a wonderful experience, because right away wow, this works. This is powerful. And it wasn't hard. It was like, stop, don't move. And then it emerged, it became available.
Well, it's interesting, because we learn in this study that soul consciousness is everything, that you really can't actually even imbibe truth unless you're soul conscious. So it really feels like that slogan we're talking about, to imbibe truth, you need tolerance. It's I need to be soul conscious to be able to actually absorb the truth, which is interesting.
Yeah, so you need that fundamental truth to then have the tolerance. And, sometimes it is something with spirituality. Maybe it's just to tolerate that little bit so you don't just go down the same old path and get the same result, which means you never really get to experience that magic
Mm-hmm.
of your truth. It's about having the courage.
Mm-hmm.
Tolerance there's courage in being tolerant, spiritually speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to put that in front. That
Right.
spiritual tolerance is different, is unique.
Mm-hmm.
But it's you do not lower yourself. You actually allow yourself to touch that greatness of the soul.
Mm-hmm. There's different dimensions of me, the soul. And when I use that, meaning that when we're experiencing, I'm sure you've experienced it too, that sometimes you really do feel like you're just a guest in this world. You really feel like you're nothing is yours. I won't go into detail, but when I was in India, one of my last trips there, hours before the flight was supposed to go, no, hours before we had to go to the airport, that's when, I skipped a step on the marble stairs, fractured the ankle, and that thought was, do not. I always thought, and immediately I went into that. I don't even know if I was trying to go into that soul conscious form. And the experience was, I don't belong to any country. The thought, it felt was so natural, like there's not going to be a problem at all. And it was really interesting. But I guess I was thinking about that, how much we need to practice so that something like this is just so natural.
Yeah, that it's the default setting, if you will, to trust spirituality. I'm often that's something that often comes to mind, is trusting spirituality. And there's obviously a connection between truth and trust. But to trust spirituality as the most effective way to meet any and every situation, challenge, difficulty, and turn that into such an opportunity to be amazed, to experience something quite wonderful, and actually to make it something in the end that's actually quite beneficial. If that person hadn't reacted in that moment, then I would never, what came next, which was an opportunity to give that person an experience that they were not at all open to until that moment. And this is it, is that we can change something that can look unfortunate into something beneficial, which is also a spiritual dynamic.
Do you find that using that experience, I think about the experience I was mentioning about too, that it reinforces your love to just want to go deeper?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think I love magic. Okay. So now you know. Anything magical, I'm there. Now, we live in a world of rational, logical thinking, and even though we love stories, magical stories about magic, movies about magic, all of that, where does magic fit in our very logical, rational, science-based world? Although a lot of the technological advances can seem quite magical at times. But this magic of spirituality, it doesn't require any special equipment, any kind of higher education. Although I do think of this, a spiritual practice, spiritual knowledge, as the highest education. In fact, I think there's something incredibly attractive, precisely, I think, because of how benevolent, how beneficial it is.
Yeah, I ask that because it comes full circle back to that topic, that anytime you're experiencing, in this example, that you really need to become soul conscious, and then you're experiencing this tolerance, and then you experience the impact of that, of your response, that it really makes you just want to go deeper into the experience of truth.
Absolutely.
Very much so. Well, look at that. Time just flies by. So we'll end with a reflection. I forgot to introduce Tanya. So we sort of get into our routine here. So Tanya is another student of the Brahma Kumaris, and she is visiting from Montreal. So if we're lucky, she might join us next week. Same time, same channel here. So we'll just have a couple of minutes, if you don't mind, with a little reflection.
I'd love to, sure. I am aware of the room around me, the body in which I sit, and this energy of awareness itself that hovers, resides in that area of the center of the forehead and my eyes, the eyes of this body. When I direct my attention there, I am honing in on this truth of who and what I am, where I am. And as I do that, allowing myself to become concentrated in my seeing, in that energy of consciousness, that in fact is just a point of luminous energy. As I become centered and concentrated there, I begin to experience how I truly am. That peaceful being, that silent energy, is so rich in potential. That potential to bring benefit to every moment. I just observe myself, the quality of being, of energy that I am. The more I observe, the stronger the experience, the more present I become to myself. I begin to understand, to see the possibilities of everything that I can become, that I can bring into the moments of my life. And to live those moments is the next step. To have the courage to bring this spiritual truth of being into the moments. Experience the wonder of that truth of the soul. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Thank you for those who've joined with us through Instagram as well as YouTube. I can't do with my normal thing, which is ask our interviewee what comes up next programming.
So I guess no idea.
So just for those to be aware, our experience sessions, the evening meditations in English, have been extended to an hour. So they start at 6:30 p.m. to 7, and for a full hour, so 7:30 Mountain Standard Time. Sessions at the Northeast Center on site are to be placed on hold right now, just with the current situation. But souls can actually access the recorded sessions if they go onto the YouTube BK Calgary website and just look under playlists, and you'll find the Hindi evening meditation. And we still have our soul cafes that are taking place on Saturdays at 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock. Those are also streamed on YouTube as well. Zoom links are actually only provided by email at this point in time, just to make sure that we ensure the safety and security of the participants who are there online. And if there's other sessions you're interested in, you're welcome to visit the center's website as well. But while I go back there and close everything, maybe Tanya can give us a very super brief summary of the New Year's Eve program for those who would like to experience it. It was very powerful. Just go onto the Calgary YouTube website, just type in BK Calgary, and there's a New Year's Eve program. So tell us in a synopsis.
Oh, it was so long ago. But it was basically an evening to explore through story, through meditation, how we can bring newness by moving away from trying to change everything and everyone, including ourselves, to simply accepting. And so I think very connected to the topic for this evening, having that tolerance by being connected to our truth, and from that truth, finding a wealth of acceptance and the beauty and the benefit of that in everything and everyone.